Welcome to another video. This was the last question I posted as a quiz in the community section, and I noticed that too many people got the answer incorrectly. As you can see in the thumbnail, 60% of the respondents chose the first option, which would have been the correct answer if the question was find the domain. But the question said find the range. And I know you all know the difference between range and domain. And if you did not know, well, this is the video for you to see it. Now, I'm going to highlight some of the things I saw in the comments that explain why too many people got the answer wrong and only 15% of 11,000 answers were correct. Let's get into the video. So this is the graph of the function. As you can see, there is nothing between -2 and 2 along the y-axis. So the range of a function is the set of outputs, that is the values of y that you can find on the function. So you notice that you can get everything from -infinity up to -2, then you skip and you start again from 2 all the way to +infinity. That was the question I was asking. Now, if I showed you the graph, I'm sure you could answer the question, but there is no graph usually because they want you to think about it or find any way to answer it. So the first set of people who chose option A were actually answering the wrong question. Never answer the wrong question. Never. Okay, so this was about range, not domain. Yes, if it was domain, you would say, oh, this is a polynomial. The domain of all polynomials is from -infinity to +infinity, so there are no exceptions. This would be the only part that would give you an exception, which is 0. You cannot have x equals 0. So those who chose option A were clearly answering the question for domain, as expressed in this comment. That was a funny comment. And it is the most popular comment, which means that most people did what this same person did. And there's another comment like that. And another comment. And another comment. And so many more like that. So that's it. We're not doing domain, we're doing range. Okay. Now, another part of the problem was someone thought that x plus 1 over x, well, remember, because I typed it, it looks like this, x plus 1 over x. Somehow they assumed that this means x plus 1 over x. I don't think so. I didn't use parentheses. But if this is what you did, then you would just have a rational function, because if you split this, okay, I would have written this as x over x plus 1 over x, which gives me 1 plus 1 over x, which is just the rational function 1 over x shifted 1 unit up. So that would have been this. So instead of you having this is 1 over x. Adding 1 to it means you're shifting the graph up. So the horizontal asymptote, which was 0, now becomes 1. And that's it. So it would have been option number no option, actually, because you cannot include 1 because 1 becomes the horizontal asymptote. So there is no option if this is what you were thinking. No correct option. Okay? Because the range would have been from -infinity to just before 1, union from 1 to infinity. Because the new graph, if this is what you thought I gave you, which was this, would have been, where is it? Let's do it here. Would have been something like this. And then this would have come this way. Oh, come on, Newton. This would have come this way. So you would have had your horizontal asymptote as y equals 1. So it means you cannot include 1. But the option I gave you was -infinity to 1. So no option would have been correct. Okay, so wrong. Okay, now let's go to What other reasons did people have? Maybe they just didn't know how to find range. I saw a comment like that. I usually get asked about domain. I really don't know how to do range. So let's do range. So the very first thing you want to ask yourself is, I know it is not the domain, so I'm not looking for the values of x. I am looking for the values of y, the smallest value of y to the biggest value of y. That's the meaning of range. Okay? Now, try not to guess. It's always better to know the technique, the process. Okay? If a function has an inverse, it's better to find the inverse of that function. Now, the domain of the inverse is the range of the other function. For example, let me just state a fact. So, I like doing this day. Fact. If f inverse, okay, I'm going to use that here, is the inverse of f. So if this function is the inverse of this function, then the domain of f inverse is the range of f. It's a very simple fact, okay? If these two are inverses of each other, the domain of one is the range of the other. The range of one is the domain of the other. Easy. So can you find the inverse of this function? Well, go back to your algebra too. That's where we learn how to find the inverse of a function. How do you find the inverse of a function? Well, see what we're going to do. We're going to say, let f of x be equal to y, and let it be x plus 1 over x. Okay, I'm using this because I want to use this inverse notation. Okay, so now we want to find the inverse of this function. I know when I explained in the comment, I used calculus, but I noticed that calculus was just for a select group of people, and this was the better way. The algebra way is the better way, as shown in this comment. So if we find this inverse, what do? The first thing is to find f inverse of x. Y equals x plus 1 over x. To find the inverse, your first step is anywhere you see y, change it to x. Anywhere you see x, change it to y. Okay, so we're going to say x equals y plus 1 over y. So the next thing is to solve for y. Try to solve for y. Well, we can't solve for y because you got y here and y here. We'll have to form a quadratic. So multiply every term by y to get rid of this fraction. So you're going to say that you have xy equals y squared plus 1. Make a quadratic out of this. You end up with y squared minus xy plus 1 is equal to 0. Solve this. You got y will be equal to minus b. Use the quadratic formula, which is going to be x plus or minus square root of b squared is going to be x squared minus 4ac. That's minus 4 all over 2. You see this y is actually your f inverse of x is x plus or minus square root of x squared minus 4 over 2. Now, do you know the domain? Remember this claim. The domain of f inverse is the range of f, which is the question. So we have found this function. What is the domain of this function? Well, this is a polynomial. In fact, look at it. So you can say this is x over 2 plus or minus 1/2 of the square root of x squared minus 4. This is a polynomial. The domain of all polynomials is negative infinity to positive infinity. So this doesn't matter. The domain will be the intersection of the two domains of f inverse of x is the domain of half of x intersection is the intersection of the two parts. Hey, right, well. So what's the domain? So we say domain of f inverse of x is, the domain of this is negative infinity to infinity intersection. What's the domain of this? What values of x will not work here? We cannot get values of, remember, for you to have the square root of a number, the number has to be 0 or greater than 0. So you just quickly solve this inequality. X squared minus 4 must be greater than or equal to 0. That means that your x must be x squared is greater than or equal to 4. Absolute value of x must be greater than or equal to 2. That means the number of steps you take from 0 must be greater than or equal to 2. Okay? And that was the domain we got in whatever the other problem I solved for all values of x. Okay, so here we're going to have, this is going to be from negative, so we say x is less than negative 2 or x is greater than 2. That's how you solve this. So we got negative infinity to, or equal to. So we got negative infinity to 2 union 2 to infinity. Now, this set is a subset of this. Everything here is inside this. So the intersection is basically this, and that's your answer. Range of x plus 1 over x is this part of the solution. Union never stop learning. The train is coming. Those who stop learning, stop living. Bye-bye.